Keepie Uppies with Richie and Tots.
So welcome everybody to the next episode of Keepie Uppies, and we're absolutely delighted to be joined by the presenter and football commentator and podcast host, Michael Clarke. Thanks a million, Michael, for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. Great to talk to you.
Super. So we're going to get stuck in. Nice, wee, easy one to start with. Who was your football team when you were growing up, and also who was your football hero?
Well, my local football team is Carrick Rangers, and they're the team I support in Northern Ireland. Are we looking across the water, or do you want me to keep it local for now?
Yeah, across the water as well, yeah.
Well, it's no secret I'm a Manchester United supporter, so I'm a bit happier to talk about it this season.
Yeah, it's funny, whenever we were doing the podcast last season, anytime somebody was saying they were a Manchester United fan, because me and Richie are Liverpool fans, we were just obviously pretty smug and delighted. We were, Liverpool were in a great spot, but of course, how times have changed with Manchester United. What do you think of the job that Eric Ten Hag has done? It's considering the really difficult start, the 2 defeats, wasn't it, in the first 2 league games? But since then, and how he dealt with the whole Ronaldo situation as well, it's so far so good.
Yeah, he's played a blinder, hasn't he? He came in, a lot of people were understandably scrutinising his every move. Those results had everybody wondering whether he was the man for the job. But I really like the way he conducts himself. He has stuck to his guns. He has a clear idea of how he wants to play. And the majority of the players that he has brought in have done very well for the team and enhanced the team. And that has been, making decisions at times going right. Christian Eriksen is a player who had a great career in England. Obviously, with the health problem, had to come back again and play at a smaller club and try and get himself re-established. And people were going, is that player the profile that Manchester United need? Is Casemiro at this stage in his career the player that Manchester United needs? But look at how much of an impact it has been losing those players in recent weeks through injury and suspension. So it proves that he has known time and time again what he wants, and he's been able to bring it to the club. And Martinez is really the shining light on his knowledge, because everyone said he's far too small to be a centre-back in the Premier League, big physical league as it is, and he's been one of the best defenders in England. So it turns out he knows a thing or two.
Yeah, it pains me to say that. No, his signings have all been pretty good, and also he's probably kicked on a few players as well. You look at Rashford, who looked pretty lost this time last season. It looked as if he was going to be heading out. He's just a different player. Fred as well, I know maybe he didn't have a great game I think last week, but his form has probably been better, so he's improving players as well. And as I said, the way he handled the Ronaldo situation, that could have went either way, because he's a popular player with the fans. I'm sure he's a popular player within the change room, so he kind of dealt with the situation. The club's moved on, and it's almost like Ronaldo, who, yes, of course he'll be remembered, but I think they're a stronger team and a better team for it.
It's something you see in all the best managers. They know how to get that extra something out of players. And also, when you're at a high-profile club, as Manchester United are, and the level of attention that they have on them is just hard to fathom, hard for anyone to really understand, that they can't switch off. Anywhere they go, there's somebody watching them, someone following them. But he has answered, I thought, the media very well at times. He's been able to stand up and say, I'm not getting into that, or this is what I think on the matter, or even just pretend it's all rosy in the garden when behind the scenes there's stuff going on and he's dealing with it. But he doesn't let anybody in. He protects his players, but he has his own clear mindset. This is what I want, and he doesn't shy away from saying, Manchester United, big club, has to win things. I must deliver, which sometimes managers try and buy themselves time, but that's not going to work at a successful club or a club who historically have been successful, because fans are going to say, I don't want a manager with a small-time mentality who's going to say, oh, it would be great to get into a cup final and maybe finish fourth. That's just not good enough when you're a big club and you want to return to past glories. So, yeah, he's hit the ground running. He still has to go and win the League Cup final. He still has to go and see how much further he can take the team. Hasn't won anything yet. So far, so good, and I'm sure that's the way he would describe it as well.
That's it. And what about sort of your local team, Carrick Rangers, talking about managers? Stuart King has done a pretty solid job at Carrick. You must be delighted how things are going. I know you have to be impartial and all that, but you must be pretty pleased how things are going so far for Carrick.
Really pleased. Every Carrick Rangers supporter starts the season hoping they can put themselves sooner rather than later in a position where relegation isn't on the table anymore. And they've nearly done that now. They're a team who are now starting to talk about, can we push for that 7th spot in the next couple of years? Can we get into the European playoffs? Cup run hasn't worked out this time around, but those are things that long-term he wants to build, and that's why experienced heads have come in. And it's nice to see that bit of ambition in terms of the board saying, yes, let's bring in people who have won things, who still have something to offer. It's not a case of one last payday for someone that couldn't get a club anywhere else, which, clubs sometimes at the bottom half of the table and in lower divisions can fall into that category, getting, I don't know, maybe a bit misty-eyed and romantic and look at somebody who has been a great player and lured into, let's get the name on board. But Carrick Rangers have recruited well for the most part, and yeah, Stuart's done a really, really good job. It's a tough job, I think, Carrick Rangers. Nobody expects them to win anything, but they're also not expected to. I think now that they've what he's been able to do, fans are nearly looking and saying, well, we don't want to go backwards. We can't get relegated. I think any manager that's been in that position where you're teetering with relegation, even if they're the manager that's brought them up before, gets the heave-ho. It's very rare to sort of have that longer tenure nearly. And maybe clubs that fall into the yo-yo bracket have that issue where things need freshened up because of trying to deal with the high of promotion and then the impending relegation or suffering relegation. So I don't think it's an easy job, despite the fact nobody's saying, well, you should win the league, you should win the Irish Cup. And I think he's dealt with that pressure very well. So selfishly, I hope it can continue as much as possible, and fair play to him for taking on the job and doing what he's done with it, because he's a very ambitious guy. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves, Stuart, and he, I think, again, like any manager worth their salt, piles pressure on themselves, which it's probably not a nice position to be in, but any managers listening to this will know exactly what I mean.
Yeah, you can see he's very determined, hard-working, and you've certainly got a very good manager in charge of your local side. And speaking of Carrick Rangers, then you played a bit of ball yourself then. For Carrick Rangers, you were captain. You were telling me right up until under 17. So you must have been handy enough.
I'm sure anybody listening from the Carrickfergus area will have their own opinion on that. I was okay. I was centre back. Tried to just get rid of things. That was my job. Just deal with the danger. Don't let them get shots at our keeper if we could possibly manage it. But it was something that, it was funny because I guess anybody with an opinion or an idea of me now would just assume, I was playing football from no age and obsessed with it. I was obsessed with football, but it was English football initially. I wasn't going to matches and watching the Irish League till I was a teenager. Bar one or two, maybe around Christmas time with relatives and things like that. So it wasn't something I did massively as a child. It was when I started secondary school. I had been playing a bit of football during the summer with a team called Apex, and a friend of mine wasn't able to go there anymore, and I think I was complaining about it to a school friend. And he said, well, we all play down at Carrick Rangers, a couple of the lads I'd have been close to. Why don't you and the other fella, why don't you come down and see if you're any use? And that was the entry into Carrick Rangers. And my coach all the way through was a guy called Jeff Morris, who was brilliant with me. Really, really enjoyed playing under Jeff. And had several years of being captain and cup finals and a couple of medals. We didn't win any leagues, unfortunately, but certainly very happy days looking back on it.
So you were like the Martinez of Carrick Fergus, was that what you were, or were you more like the Colin Coates?
I would love to say I was either of those. Yeah, maybe in terms of style, a bit more like Coatesy, but in terms of talent, nowhere near him. We couldn't lace his boots. But I love playing football, and I was determined to try and do it as long as I could. I broke my leg twice, which certainly didn't help matters. The second time was, I think it was the last game of the season with the under-17s. So that was obviously very disappointing. And then the opportunity did arise to actually join up with the 18s. I got a call from a coach one afternoon, and they were playing Crusaders that night, and someone had got injured. And they were saying, one of the lads says, you're all right at defence. Do you think you could do a job for us? And I think it was like towards the end of a pre-season. And I couldn't because I was in London with my family on a holiday. So it didn't happen. And I didn't really look back. I don't think I could have had an Irish League career. So at that point, I hadn't really ventured into commentary, but I was doing other media work. And I think I already knew really if I wanted to have a career, it wouldn't be as a player.
And what about your playing career? We'll obviously move on to your commentating and everything else, which has been fantastic. Any kind of wee standout moments that you can think of? Any special goals you want to run us through and pretend they were maybe from 30 yards out and off the crossbar?
Yeah, I would love to say that I scored loads. The only goal I scored in a competitive match for Carrick Rangers was in a match that I think we won 14-1, and we were playing Woodburn in Carrick, and I think it was the 11th goal in that game, and the paper wouldn't even put my name in it because you know what it's like at that level of football. Once you've destroyed a team, they just don't print the score. They think it's kind of unsporting. So I had to say to everybody, I promise you I did score. And what was bizarre was it was my right foot. They had stuck me in midfield, which I quite liked playing midfield, probably, with a bit more understanding of the game now, because I was very naive going in and just did whatever I was told. Probably I liked and would like to be more of a defensive midfielder than anything, but at that point I was approaching 6 foot even in my early teens, and it was just get you in there, stick your head on it, son, and if you can't do that, volley it away. So loyally did what the manager asked. But yeah, that game I got to play in midfield, and ball arrived edge of the box, right foot into the top corner, and I celebrated far too much for a goal that was inconsequential. And everybody came running over to me just because I wasn't a goal scorer, so no one could believe that I'd actually managed to score one. So it probably didn't look great if you were the other team in hindsight, but I certainly enjoyed myself.
Well, that's the main thing. So good times. So were you always kind of thinking about then going into commentating or presenting, or when did that, I suppose, first enter your mind?
So in terms of looking at a media career, I was about 14 or 15, and there was a local radio station in Carrick that my dad, who is a local businessman, was one of the sponsors for, and the station wasn't returning one year, and the council came to my dad and said, do you think you could run a radio station just for the summer, maybe again at Christmas if it works out, get some of the DJs to come down and do it? And he said, I'll try. So he spoke to a couple of people that he knew, and they were able to put on this radio station one summer. And as soon as I heard that he was doing that, I just wanted to be a part of it. And it wasn't a case of it being my dad and me being handed a show. I literally went in and made people tea and coffee, which I didn't even know how to do. I was just lying through my teeth. I'll do anything. I will print off their prep. I will cut things out of the newspaper. I'll do anything. I just want to be in a studio and kind of see what it's all about. And I very quickly got a taste of that and really excited by it. And then Maurice Taggart, who was the presenter in the Saturday afternoon that I was shadowing, let me come on as his sidekick and kind of his comic foil. And we hit it off, and that was my first taste of being on air. And then I realised I have to do this. So that was the moment it clicked in my brain, 15 years of age, sitting in the De Courcy Centre in Carrick Fergus in a part-time radio station, just thinking, why would anyone want a real job when I can have a lot of fun doing this? In terms of the commentary, it actually goes back a lot further, but I didn't realise it when I was 4 or 5, 6, very, very young, playing the Sega Mega Drive and playing FIFA games. They didn't have commentary on them, if you can remember those early FIFAs.
Oh, not half.
So I used to do my own. Now, I don't know that it would have sounded very good, full disclaimer, but my dad used to come home from work, and I'd have been playing on the Sega after school or whatever, and he would have said, the neighbours want to know what the score is, because I think I was making an almighty racket. But that was my first little steps into commentary, unknown to all of us at that point. So it was something I would revisit later. I remember getting in trouble. There was German midfielder Stefan Effenberg, who I would imagine you and your listeners are very aware of and can remember his playing days. My mother, not so much. So when I was shouting Effenberg, she thought I was, a very foul-mouthed young boy, and I got in a lot of trouble.
So that was you grounded then for about a week?
That was me grounded. Wasn't allowed to play my FIFA or do my commentaries.
But it's just funny that, going back, like you're talking Sega Mega Drive, the 90s, maybe early to mid 90s. So, the seed was obviously kind of planted there. I remember my mum used to have this old radio, and you put the cassette tape in and you would have hit 2 buttons. I remember you had to push them down at the same time, otherwise it didn't work, to record. And I would have had a microphone coming out of it. And I remember commentating on the World Cup of, I think it was 1998. That was France, I think. And just commentating on just a match on TV, recording it on the cassette tape, hoping it didn't go to injury time, because the cassette tape played for 45 minutes exactly. Why I did it, I've absolutely no idea. But I think that was class about the FIFA games, and it's just funny then how you've moved into that career later on, and then, as you said, 15 years of age, that's when I suppose you got your real passion. And then by the time you went into university, then a couple of years later, I suppose you had a lot of experience through working with the BBC and U105 as well. Did you find that kind of gave you a bit of a head start then when it came to starting your course, your degree in university, having that, I suppose, experience under your belt?
Yeah, I think the way it actually panned out, when I started university, I hadn't done work with either yet. I don't think. What had happened was I was working Christmas summer with Carrick Fergus FM at that stage and getting my experience there. And then when I went to university, during my time there was a guest speaker had come in, and they were from UTV. There was a human resources person, and my friend who I was sitting beside, a guy called John, we'd been out the night before in Kelly's, and John was, let's just say, in an emotional state in that 9 o'clock class and was drifting off, and she kept looking down at us, and I was thinking, I might want to work for your company, and this isn't going to look very good for me when my friend is not feeling the best this morning. So I made sure when it came to the Q&A part to put my hand up and ask lots of questions. And it's funny because, people say it's not what you know, it's who you know and all that sort of stuff. I think you have to make your own luck. I put myself out there, asked a couple of questions about, do you do work experience? We need work experience. I'd like to go into U105. She said, oh yes, well, we do. You get a week. And I said, well, I'd like 2 weeks. And she says, okay, well, we'll see. She'd asked about any experience I had, and long story short, we were having this back and forth, and it turned out the only person that had got a longer placement previously was somebody, I'll not maybe embarrass them by naming them because I don't know how public it is, but it was certainly everyone in the classroom heard it, somebody that I had trained through working in the local radio station in Carrick. So it was really just a happy coincidence. So we had a friend in common, I guess, and she says, right, okay, well, if you trained him and we employ him, and you're a teenager, you might be okay at this. So we'll have a chat afterwards. So she got me into U105, and it was initially answering the phones, and then it was helping, do bits and pieces on programs, whether that's Vox Pops, which is the embarrassing, going out with a microphone into the street, and could be asking people, where's your favourite place in Northern Ireland to go for a walk? You know, really,
Lurgan,
really important stuff. Lurgan was the popular answer, but it was just the things that you do to try and get a foot in the door. And my work experience in U105 actually helped me with the BBC later on. To try and make a long story short, my first taste of the BBC was by winning a talent search. I recorded a commentary, a bit like you did, but wasn't cassettes at that stage. It was into my laptop, and I had to commentate on an iconic goal, which they chose for you. It was David Healy's winner against England, so not hard to be happy and emotional about that. And I must have recorded about 20 different versions of it, and ended up sending the first or second recording off to the BBC. And unbelievably, after maybe a month or two later, I got a phone call saying, congratulations, you're our winner, and you're going to commentate on, as it was then, the Milk Cup. My first game was a Manchester United match, and then I got to do a couple of other games as well with Paul Gilmore, who's now at Sky Sports, and Liam Beckett, who I'm actually doing a commentary with. Well, at the time people are listening to this, I might have already done a commentary with Liam, but we're spending Valentine's together, so it's nice and romantic. But it's amazing how these things kind of work out. It's not linear. I think for anyone that's thinking about, you know, what's the path in the media, like most things in life, it isn't linear. You're doing a wee bit of this, and whilst you're spinning one plate, you might try and spin another, and things end up somehow figuring themselves out if you've any luck. And I certainly have had a lot of luck along the way, because a few years later, when the BBC gave me an opportunity on a programme which was a Sunday morning kind of religious and current affairs show called Sunday Sequence, they needed newspaper reviewers. I said I would do it. I hadn't a clue what I was doing, but I tried, and I did it for a few months until I heard there was an opening in sport. And the reason I say about the U105 experience being such a help was it turned out that the producer at the time for Radio Ulster was friends with the guy whose show I'd been sitting in on religiously every single week, Ivan Martin. And he said, look, you've been with this kid for ages now. What's he like? And Ivan lied and told him I was really nice and worked really hard. And he went, well, okay, then we'll give him a shot. And that was April 2012, I think. And that was might have been 2011. That was my first little taste of action for BBC Sport.
Fantastic. And I know you're quite modest there, and yes, you might be saying you had a wee bit of luck, but I always think sometimes you earn your own luck, and you know your hard work clearly paid off. So what was it like then commentating? It was just fascinating. You know, you ended up, one of your first games you're commentating on happened to be a Manchester United game. That must have been, take us through sort of your feelings of your first game that you were commentating on. Obviously you were nervous, but I'm sure there's a lot of excitement and everything else. And that must have been, as I said, of all teams, Manchester United, that must have been pretty exciting at the same time.
Well, the thing that made it difficult was it's the Milk Cup, so these are youth footballers. So, you know, it's fair to say you wouldn't really have a clue about these teams. You wouldn't have watched Manchester United at that age group very much. So now, fast forward to today, one of the guys that was called up to the reserves who couldn't play for Man United that fateful day was some fella, Paul Pogba. I'm not sure whatever happened to him, but there was a few players of that, well, maybe not of his caliber, but certainly recognisable names that were involved in that squad. The likes of, you know, Michael Keane, I think, was playing. So it was a great opportunity just to go and be live on the BBC on the red button and watch a football team who is famous around the world play against a team from Qatar. And you're thinking, my first ever time doing this, right? Manchester United, you can Google them, a Qatari academy. What's the pronunciation going to be like? Am I going to look really silly? And it was nerve-wracking. Like, I would never pretend that, it was easy and I just strolled in and had a great old time. It was really nerve-wracking, and nothing prepares you for a live commentary. You can do as much preparation as you want, and over time you figure out what is required, but there was no, and this isn't a criticism of anybody, I mean, it was just a crash course. It was throw you in the deep end, see if you can do it. And thankfully, I think having a few years at working at community radio made me less scared about the live element of it, less scared about saying the wrong thing, because I knew, well, if I say the wrong thing, you just correct yourself. You know, the ground will not open up and swallow you. You will be okay. So just having that little bit of calmness allowed me to have more clarity in my commentary. But yeah, you quickly learn tips in terms of player identification. You don't want to not know who scored the goal or who's down injured for a long period of time, because everybody's very sophisticated when it comes to watching matches on the TV. We do it so often that I'm sure we've all at some point thought, he hasn't a clue what's going on, because we know what commentary is meant to sound like, and it's most noticeable when it's bad. So I'm not saying that those, first matches were amazing, but they were okay enough that it didn't put the BBC off giving me another opportunity down the line.
Certainly not. And of course you've went on and you've commentated on Champions League games, international games. But I remember an interesting story you'd mentioned. Obviously, you're not going to mention the person's name, but there was you'd said to somebody one time that it was, what was it, a sort of a dream of yours to commentate in the Champions League, and the person quickly kind of shut you down and said, nope, that's not going to happen. And of course you did it by you were 30, isn't that right?
Yeah, before the age of 30, which was a ridiculous thing that I just said. And there was no way I could have known that I was going to do that, but I was just so sure that I wasn't going to let this person speak to me like that. What had happened was I was in like a training academy thing. It was called Aim High, and we were across in England, and there was over 700 people had applied to be a part of this, and they'd whittled it down to 20, a bit like X Factor. We had to do interviews, presentations, everything. It was very, very full on. And then the final 20 got taken away and did an intensive media training course. And the idea was that you were going to be placed somewhere in industry afterwards. And one of the final days, we were being put into, it was a bit like on The Apprentice when they go and they get shoved in a room with Claude and he picks apart your every fibre. And, your business proposal is rubbish and Lord Sugar will never hire you, go away. It was, I think there was, some of them had that attitude, but they were from all different media organisations. Some were, independent TV companies and all the rest of it. So there's a real smorgasbord of backgrounds there. And this particular person was cocksure that my dream would be to work for them. And they said that. They said, so tell me, first question, not what's your name or how are you? So tell me, why do you want to work for me? And maybe it gives you an idea as to my personality. I said, I don't. And he looked quite offended, which, makes sense. And I said, I'm just being honest. I appreciate your time, but I don't think I want to work for you. I don't think you do the sort of stuff I want to do. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be a broadcaster. I want to be working at a national level in the next few years. I love football. I'd love to be a full-time football commentator. And he said, you'd be lucky if you got the Irish League. I hadn't been doing any Irish League matches at this stage. And I said, well, I love the Irish League. I think that'll be amazing. But, I want to be doing the Champions League by the time I'm 30. And he said, there's not a chance. Nobody makes it. That's such a, 1% of people do that. And then how many people from Northern Ireland? And I said, well, I'm telling you, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but somehow I'm going to do it. And before I turned 30, I did with Virgin Media, and they gave me a game with Atletico Madrid and Bayer Leverkusen, and it was just one of those moments where I was thinking, I really hope that person was watching the TV.
Fantastic. I was just rang him straight after the full-time whistle had blown. Atletico Madrid. Just sent him a wee selfie or something, he or she. But great. And I think it's just, it's quite a brutal thing to say to you when you're obviously starting off, but it just shows, I suppose, your resilience and yeah.
I think you need a thick skin. I think you need a thick skin if you're going to do this. And I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. I just think that it's something that comes with the territory. You're putting yourself out there to be shot at. You're speaking on the radio, you're speaking on television. People will think they have an opinion of themselves. Who do they think they are? You know, that, and we all do it. If we're being honest, when we're watching the TV, we have opinions of the people on the TV, and it's just human nature. So it has to be water off a duck's back, and you have to not ignore everybody's opinion, but understand whose opinion counts and try and live it that way. I think that makes life an awful lot easier. I've been actually very lucky that Irish League fans have been incredibly kind to me. And when I started doing, not to jump ahead in my story, but when I started doing Northern Ireland matches, the messages that I got actually made me more nervous about the opportunity that I was being offered than being offered the opportunity, because I started to feel like, oh goodness, they all think I'm going to do well or I deserve this. I better not let them down. And that's the God's honest truth. I had that fear of, I try to not tell myself how big things are, how many people are watching or listening, because if you get into that, you go mental. It'd be really off-putting. So I just try and think, anytime I'm doing a match, I'm talking to a few people and I'm trying to make it make sense and I'm trying to stay out of the way of it. It's never about the commentator. And I do it with a sense of humour, I hope, and try and sound like I'm enjoying it, because I am. Because, you know, there's real jobs out there that people have to do. So I'm very aware of that. But just that one time where I felt, yeah, you know what, I've done this and I did it, and someone had told me that I couldn't do it, and it just made it all the sweeter to kind of think, yeah, you know, I owed that to myself to go and prove that I could do that. I was right to back myself, and, you know, luckily it came off. And the thing about it too was, you know, Virgin Media had approached me to do Europa League. I wasn't even meant to be doing Champions League for them, so it wasn't like when they got me on board, I knew I was going to tick this off. I still didn't know. I was doing matches for them, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, but they came to me midway along my contract for that season and just said, we want to give you extra games, and this is one of them. And, you know, then at that point, I went, wow, this is the chance. So it's funny how things happen. Most of the time, you can't force a door open, but you just have to make sure that if it comes your way, you grab it with both hands and you don't let yourself down, and then hopefully more things will come your way if you can prove you can do it.
I think if you can commentate on a random game on FIFA with made up names, I think you can do anything. So you can, clearly. Maybe that's maybe you just need to think back to those Sega Mega Drive days if you ever do get any kind of pre-match nerves, but you're well experienced now anyway. And what about when you're into commentating? Did you have, you know, the way sort of when I'm sure you would ask players, you know, who is it that you looked up to? Did you have commentators that you looked up to when you were doing the commentating? Yeah. Obviously, a lot of people talk about Martin Tyler. I can remember Barry Davis and John Motson back in the 90s, and obviously even further back than that were top commentators. Is there one or two commentators from across the water or locally that you would have kind of looked up to?
Most certainly. Firstly, Jackie Fullerton, and I'm not just saying that. Jackie, when I was watching Irish Cup finals on the TV, it was Jackie's voice oftentimes I was hearing, and, you know, the big Northern Ireland matches too, and you were thinking, what an amazing job. What an amazing thing to get to do, to go and watch the most important games in the country and to get to speak to those players afterwards and in and around the games. And then you get a bit older and you understand the World Cups he's attended and all the many other things that he got to do in his career. So very easy to look at Jackie and just be in awe and think, what a role model. And when I got to meet him, just lived up to every expectation, to be honest. Incredible professional, so generous with his time and his guidance. He was never patronising. You know, he's a larger-than-life personality. You realise you are in the presence of a real star. You know, someone that all the players liked. And, you know, when you go into football grounds, sometimes media officers don't let you down corridors or wouldn't let you into changing rooms. Jackie nearly had carte blanche access to anywhere he wanted to go. And even in the street, there were people shouting out to him and calling over. And he just had this brilliant way about him. But for me, the thing that's stood out to me about Jackie was any time I was doing a match, when I started doing Final Score, and he would be sitting near me, that I was so nervous, because I thought, well, he's a real commentator and I'm learning, and he's hearing all my mistakes, even if they're not mistakes that somebody else picks up on. He's going to think, well, it's like learning how to play guitar. You finished the lesson, you've gone, I've done that okay. If we were to look over and see a real guitarist, you would know that they know that you haven't done it perfectly. So Jackie was a hero, and also Alan Green, because he was the first, as cantankerous as Alan has been, and a famous fallout with Fergie, and on 5 Live he always sounded like he was angry about Manchester United in one way or another. Despite all that, he was a voice from home on a radio station that I have ambitions of working for one day. And he kind of, they say, like, you can't be it if you can't see it. He allowed me to believe that it wasn't just certain types of voices that could one day be high-profile BBC commentators, and that was kind of what gave me that extra drive, if you like. So Jackie was the person I heard regularly and thought, I'd love to do this. And then when I started paying more attention and hearing Alan Green on Premier League matches, I started to dream a little bigger.
Yeah, I always remember his commentaries with Radio 5 Live. It was on. He was actually at I remember. I think he was at a game. He was at a Liverpool game I was at way back in the 90s. He obviously was commentating on that particular game. I managed to get his autograph, which was good. Two iconic commentators from Northern Ireland. So, is there any games that if there was a couple of games that you would love to kind of relive that you commentated on? There was one game. If there was one game that you'd love to go back and commentate on, what would it be?
I've been very lucky. I have done some real thrillers down through the years. The game between Northern Ireland and Spain's under-21s at Shamrock Park a few years ago, where Shane Lavery was on fire, and Spain had a really good team. Dani Ceballos, Mikel Oyarzabal were all at that when I did the game with Darren Murphy. And that was a really, really good game, because obviously nobody thought Ian Barraclough's Northern Ireland under-21s were going to be able to get anywhere near them. And we ended up with a real thriller that night. I think it ended up 5-3 to Spain. So when you look at matches, there are bigger matches that I've done, but that one, just for the sheer entertainment and surprise value of it, has to be right up there. The last few minutes of Carrick Rangers against Ballina this season, which it ended up very controversial, the penalty decision in the game involving Warren Point, which was, we all can say, a terrible penalty. It ends up being missed, saved, whatever you want to put it, and eventually turned in, and that put Warren Point down. But Carrick Rangers and Ballina played out a really, really boring game, and Ballina were 1-0 up, and then Carrick scored 2 goals at the death, the last one being an injury time overhead kick by a man in his mid-30s. So that was like an Aguero moment at the bottom half of the table. And I just remember that feeling, and I commentated on it. I think everyone could say, I was probably a bit critical of Carrick through the match, and I was always mindful of trying to make sure nobody could ever accuse me of being biased. But somewhere deep down, I knew that my hometown team were likely going to stay up off the back of this. So there was a real pride in being able to be a part of that very special moment and seeing what that meant. But then I'm giving you asked for one and I'm giving you loads. The other one is the Josh McGuinness goal against Kosovo, just for how that felt, because it was Premier Sports that got me in to do the Nations League, and everybody knows about how bad Northern Ireland's record in the Nations League has been, and to finally end that and to do it in the fashion that they did, and the noise and the volume and the feel around the stadium, that was pretty cool as well. So in terms of, hairs on the back of your neck, there's 3 matches that have given me that I can think of. I've done matches that have been 8-9 goals and bonkers for all sorts of reasons, but off the top of my head, there are 3 that come to the front of my mind quite quickly.
And it must be very easy as well to kind of get caught up in the moment. You know, that kind of, you talked about it there, that Aguero moment where Martin Tyler, who's kind of the ultimate professional, just kind of lost the plot, but that was all because of the drama around, obviously, you know, Man City having to score 2 goals in injury time. And I always remember Steven Gerrard scoring a goal against Olympiacos. Liverpool had to win by 2 clear goals, and Andy Gray, of all people, who's the biggest Everton supporter ever, kind of celebrating as if it was his own team that had got out of the group stages.
Brilliant goal. Remember it well.
So do you ever find yourself kind of moments, I'm sure, that you kind of just almost get caught up in the moment, or do you try and kind of almost restrain yourself? But I suppose, you know, it must be difficult because you're a football fan, first and foremost.
It is difficult. Yeah, no, it is difficult. When it's an Irish League game, the story tells itself. You know, when it's on TV, you're just adding to the picture. But there are moments that are undeniably special, and it would, as a commentator, you'd need to be rubbish to ruin them, because the moment means so much to everyone and they can see it. So for me, you know, if you can enhance it, brilliant, but it doesn't need to be overly complicated. Martin Tyler will be forever remembered for the way that he said a player's name, and that's all he said, really. And I'm not saying it wasn't a good commentary, but he just, Aguero! And it's iconic because it captured exactly what was going on. Everyone was like, oh my goodness, this is happening. There's other commentators with different styles that try to be a bit more poetic. There's no one way of doing it, but for me, when McGuinness scored, I just screamed Josh McGuinness's name. So, and I wasn't trying to pay homage to Martin Tyler. He's an amazing commentator and has had a career that I could only dream of emulating or getting anywhere near, but it was just how I felt. And I think that is just trying to be as honest as you can and just put words to what you're saying, and people can hear and feel the emotion in it. You know, I'm a Northern Ireland fan. Seeing us score a winning goal in a competition where our run has been miserable and we've had no luck. So I'm sure every bit of relief was poured into every syllable of Josh's name, and I probably added a few syllables in just as I elongated. I don't know how many N's were in my pronunciation of McGuinness, but it was... I don't think you should hide your emotion. I just think, you know, you should never try and put your spin on a match. That's more so what people might do wrong when they're starting out. They might have a feel of who deserves something, and really that isn't your place. You just help make it better, add to what they're saying. And if it's the radio, you're painting the picture and you're having to be descriptive, and you just need to try and be true to your person, that's your listener, that, you know, you are their eyes. So you need to try and tell them realistically what is going on. So I get very sort of serious about that, because I always think I want to come away from a game and just feel like I was authentic. I don't want to ever have to force it. I don't like saying, what a great game of football that was, when it was dross and everybody hated it. I'm not going to be that person. So I try and tell you how it is, basically, and I try not to insult anybody. If it's a bad game of football, let's all be able to say there have been better matches. I'm not going to hammer people and say, why have you made me watch that? Because I'm in a privileged position. But yeah, your emotion definitely comes into it. And sometimes, probably most where I have to bite my tongue is the occasional refereeing decision, when you think maybe something particularly poor has happened and you feel there's an injustice there. But again, it isn't my place to pontificate. I can only offer an explanation or a rationale for what we're seeing, and then leave it to a co-commentator to add expertise, or leave it to the viewer, the listener, to really process it and feel how they want to feel about it.
Yeah, just pass it on to Darren Murphy. That's what you do. Or the other co-commentator.
And they will tell you, oftentimes, especially our amazing people in the Irish League, they'll tell you, honest commentary, we don't cover things up. And like there have been some tough ones. If you think the Irish Cup semi-final, Mourneview Park, Larne, Crusaders, people didn't understand why the referee was sending off Johnny Tuffy, and it was a really, really controversial one, but he gives himself no space to do anything other than that when he warns the keeper. Second one's a yellow card, third one has to be a second yellow and a red. But I knew what the laws of the game stated, so I understood why that decision was being made, but a lot of people were very confused. Now, separate what should happen, letter of the law, based on the events, with what you would like to see happen or what you think should happen, because that's not the same thing. And that's where you have to separate your emotion as a commentator. You have to know why a referee has done something, even if you don't think it should happen, even if you don't like that football and its laws are currently written a certain way. You know, you can't reinvent the wheel as such. So I always try and be balanced and try and see things for what they are. And it can be difficult at times, but like the Johnny Tuffy one, I knew that it was going to be a red card. A lot of people didn't understand why, and because of the importance of the game, a lot of people were really, really upset. But, you know, probably deep down football commentators are all big geeks. We'll actually read IFAB's laws of the game, and and we don't want these moments to come up, but we just fear that they will. So you try and figure out every eventuality before it happens, so that you sound like you know what you're on about, because it's your job.
Very good. Well, I can't get you on without discussing the success of the Score NI. You're in the top 10% podcasts globally. So you must, when that was announced a few months ago, that must have been pretty satisfying.
Niall, I'm still laughing at that, because it is true. Spotify have told me and they've sent me statistics, but there's no way in my wildest imagination that was ever something I was trying to do. I just wanted to talk about Irish League football because I love it and it's class and it's been so good to me, and I've got to know so many people through it and make what I hope are going to be, you know, lifetime friends. And we were doing this program and it's changed up over the years. Anyone that's stuck with it over the years, started off in Lisburn's 98 FM and then branched out and went on to Bangor FM too, and then in more recent times, the station in Downpatrick has taken it, and it became a podcast a few years ago, because initially I was probably quite stubborn and said, it's a radio program, doesn't need to be a podcast. And then people were complaining that, you know, it was on at a time and they missed it, or they really wanted to listen back and there wasn't a way. So begrudgingly, I started to put together a podcast from that week's show, and it started to do very well. And the format, as I say, has changed over the years. So in its current guise, we tend to get 3 guests on from 3 different clubs every week, have a 15 to 20 minute chat with each of them about whatever's relevant with their club, their season, and occasionally then we do sit down, maybe hour-long interviews with different guests. So we had Raymond Crangle, top official, come and kind of give us his version of This Is Your Life. We did it with Stephen Baxter this year, and that was cool. I got to go sit in the boardroom at Seaview with the Irish Cup on a podium beside me. And, you know, there are moments that you could easily not really soak up, because, like, that's special, the Irish Cup. There are people who will never get their hands on that. And there's me, what started off as just this kind of fun little project, and now we've got thousands of people listening to us, and I'm getting to hang out with one of the best managers that we've had in the Irish League in the company of the Irish Cup, you know. And I'm not doing it for, I'm not there because of the company that I work for. I'm there because this on its own, this little entity, this little program has become something that a lot of people want to be on and want to listen to. And so I'm probably of many of the things I've done, the Score is one of the most proud achievements, I would say, because nobody, and you know, if there's no budget, I don't mind sort of pulling back the curtain. There's no budget, there's no big production team on this. It's usually me on my own, or I get a bit of help once in a while from someone else. But it's a lot of work. And then when I start to see Spotify say, yeah, you're the top 10% of podcasts followed globally, it's very hard to process that, because I was never thinking in those terms. I was just kind of going, I hope people here enjoy it. So when you start to crunch the numbers and see people around the world are enjoying it, and maybe people that grew up in Northern Ireland and moved to America, Canada, Australia, different places like that, they are all tuning into and having their opinions on it. It's amazing. So I feel very, very lucky. And if you are one of those listeners and you're listening to this, thank you. I say it all the time, but I really do mean it. It's such a great thing, again, to pretend that it's work. I get to talk to some of the best, most talented people in the sport that I love who are working in this country at the moment, and share their stories and give them a bit more airtime than they get anywhere else. And it's a pretty cool thing to be able to offer.
No, it's absolutely great work, I have to say, and it's clear, you know, the passion that you have for the local game. It comes across the airwaves, but you know, it's just a great opportunity for, you know, whether you're a Glenavon fan, Dungannon fan, Linfield fan, Glentoran, Cliftonville, to get a wee insight to, you know, some of the players that you worship, or some of the opposing players that you're given stick to. I just think it's great. You can't think of any other football radio show where you would see that.
Do you know what's great as well? There's certain guests we've had on, and people have said to me after, I always hated them, but they actually sound all right. And I think that's class, because we're so tribal. We have our clubs and we have the players we love to hate, and then you realise they're real people. You know? And it's class. It's class just to be able to say, yeah, it turns out he's a real person and has thoughts and feelings too, and you've given him abuse every time he's come to your ground for God knows how many years, and probably deep down most of them love it. We have that closeness in the Irish League still with our players and the managers, and that's, I think, the enduring quality which makes us all really, really want to keep coming back, because we are so invested. And the fact that the players and the managers are so giving of their time with me, sometimes they're getting a text message from me the day before going, any chance? And they'll jump through hoops to help you out if they can. And that is 100% not the case in most top leagues in other countries. It just wouldn't be. So I'm so grateful that even when I'm not the most organised, they're so gracious and so giving with their time.
Yeah, it's great, and keep up the great work. I love the chat with our player Jeff Hughes, which couldn't have been easy for you or for him. You know, obviously he's made the recent decision to retire, but even gives you a wee insight, I suppose, to the vulnerability of the players. And as you said, they're human after all, and football is what they've lived and breathed all their life. You know, so it was a great chat with him, I have to say, but obviously maybe not in those circumstances. So,
and the thing is, you're learning stuff, and not to make it sound really boring, but genuinely you get to learn stuff about them, about their careers. You get to, I try my best to ask slightly different questions, just so you can get a more rounded impression of them. I thought Johnny McMurray was on the show a couple of weeks ago talking about his move from Crusaders to Warrenpoint Town, and I asked him outright, you know, are you difficult to manage? Do you think you're hard work sometimes for managers? And I don't know that players get to be asked those questions in other places as much. And he was really honest and said, yeah, do you know what? Sometimes probably. But he was able to also offer his own thoughts on maybe some of the things that frustrated him about playing time or positions. And by no means was he moaning about Crusaders, but he got to explain himself. And I reckon anybody that listens to that would maybe have a slightly different take on Johnny than they would have done, you know, going into it, knowing that he was coming on and maybe surmising what might come up. So I like to be able to do those things and just put a person there, have a chat with them, and leave it up to you what you think about what they have to say, because we all have different opinions, and I don't agree with everybody that comes on, and I'm sure they don't agree with every question I ask, but I really, really love just kind of learning a bit about what makes people tick and their different journeys. And Jeff Hughes has had such a great career. he deserves longer, to be honest, just to talk about what he's done, because most of us won't get to play a game at Wembley.
Definitely not. I think those days have gone for me. I'll just focus on my over 35s football. And if are you over 35 yet, Michael? Because we're trying. No, you're not. And I think I kind of use this podcast more to recruit players, because we're really stuck for well, we're not stuck for players. It's just the players that we've got aren't producing the goods. We conceded 15 goals in our last 2 games and only scored 1. So yeah, it's not good. It's not good. Anyway, we're not going to talk about that. It's
not the best.
No.
Is the manager getting sacked in the morning?
Well, Richie is actually kind of co-manager. So yeah, he's chairman. So technically he would have to sack himself, wouldn't he? So no, he'll probably be kept on. I think he got the dreaded vote of confidence. We'll say that.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's never good, is it?
No, I'm 33, so in a couple of years I'll join. But I banged up my knee last week playing football, and I was talking to somebody about it because I had this horrible golf ball size swelling in my knee, and I've been icing it like mad, and it's all sorts of horrible colours a week on. But this fella I was talking to is about 18 or 19, and he genuinely, without any hint of irony, said, "Should you be playing football at your age?"
Wow.
So that was horrible.
That's rough now. There's no need for that.
I haven't slept since.
Keepie Uppies with Ruchi and Tots.
So we're going to rattle on then with your Keepie Uppies. The homework I set you, which, as I said, isn't easy, and you're probably not going to please everybody, but sure, what can you do? So, happy enough to give this a go?
Absolutely. And Can I just put a disclaimer on this, that I have answered for the last decade or so in terms of when I have been commentating on the league, because as I alluded to earlier, when I was younger, I wasn't watching religiously, so I feel like I would have rose-tinted glasses, and I don't want to be unfairly leaving out names, so I'm going to try and give it as honest as an appraisal as I can for the last 10, 11 years. That's allowed.
You might be getting a few players that mightn't be looking to come on the score anymore, if you've insulted quite a few here. But anyway, yeah. So, the best team, so that's right, I meant to say it, yeah, as you know, but the listeners won't, about we're keeping this all local, so we're keeping this the Irish Premier League. So, the best team in the last 10 years then that you've ever watched?
So, this was tough because you had the amazing title-winning Crusaders team. I'm trying to think, was that 15-16? You had the 12-13 Cliftonville team with the Boyce Gormley partnership, which I think might be second in my list, but I've gone for the 16-17 Linfield team that did the amazing comeback. Crusaders were leading the title charge. Linfield had lost at the start of January against Coleraine and were 9 points behind them, but went on an incredible winning run to win the league on the final day at Solitude. And I covered pretty much the entire Linfield charge that season. And again, I'll tell you this. The way it was working on Final Score was kind of because I wasn't the main commentator. I was doing the team that was chasing, and the main commentator that year was doing the team that was leading, if you like. And I did Linfield all the way through to the final day of the season, when by that point it looked like they were going to win the league, and I got flipped and I was at Seaview to watch Crusaders beat Glenavon in a game that ultimately didn't matter. But I saw what Linfield were doing, and I think maybe just because I was close to them that season and saw the charge, that's given me that extra appreciation for them. And they pip it Because, like, in terms of players, you obviously like Roy Carroll, you had Gallagher, Hockey, Stafford, Mulgrew, Aaron Burns was playing incredibly, Paul Smith, Andy Waterworth. You know, you could run through the whole team. I nearly did. So they're my pick.
Yeah, it's a pretty good team. Paul Smith, he's scoring some absolute scorchers. For Late Norwich, he's at.
Yeah, he's doing brilliantly.
Yeah.
I think Michael O'Neill will be keeping an eye on him. We might be seeing him get a call up at some point. I really, really hope so, because he's a great guy. He's worked so hard, and I think we've all seen him just be fantastic this year. So he deserves that opportunity, and I know Michael O'Neill previously was a fan of him, and well, I'll say fingers crossed, just because I personally think he deserves another shot. Fingers crossed he sees, he gets that chance offered to him again to pull on the green jersey for Northern Ireland.
There you are, inside knowledge exclusive from Michael Clarke. Paul Smith is going to be in the next Northern Ireland squad.
Didn't say that.
So next two is the best captain and best goal scorer.
People are going to think there's a Linfield bias. It changes on the way down, but for me, best captain is Jamie Mulgrew. He is someone who very quietly leads the team. He's, for me, exactly what you want of a leader. He wouldn't ask any player to do something he wouldn't do himself. He puts his body on the line. He's brave. He at times has had to play through injury. He's at times had to prove a manager wrong to fight back into the team. If we think back a few years ago when he wasn't getting as many matches, and he's someone who, when he's unavailable, you see the difference, and you see that even in these vintage years, will we say, that he is still someone that absolutely commands his place, and I have the utmost respect for him. So Jamie Mulgrew for me is the top pick. But you could easily in recent times look across teams and have your own ones. Like Coatsy, we mentioned him earlier, would be another great example. But I've gone for Mulgrew.
Okay, and best goal scorer.
So the season I came on board was, I think, Spike's last season, Glenn Ferguson, and he was at Lisburn Distillery. So I didn't pick him. For me, he's the best striker the Irish League's ever had. But that's my reason for disqualifying him, if you like, because seeing a couple of games he played for the Whites before he called it a day, probably doesn't get him into the conversation for the best in my time. So I've gone for Waterworth because he got nearly 300 goals in the Irish League. He's been a pivotal player, and I think probably because I was thinking of that 16-17 season where Linfield are losing 1-0, and I'm thinking, well, maybe Crusaders are going to win the league. Maybe all the action is going to come back to this ground at the end of final score, and then Waterworth goes and scores a hat-trick, and then he went and did it again in the Irish Cup final. So it's a straight shootout, because I looked at best goal scorer in terms of longevity. So for me, it's a straight shootout between him and Joe Gormley, and I just went for Andy Waterworth, and I hope that is incentive enough so that Gormley, if he surpasses him, can somehow pretend that it was because of me and not his incredible talent.
And Glenn Ferguson was handy enough as well. I started off a Glenavon supporter back in the mid-90s, and he was still knocking about for Glenavon for a few seasons before he joined Linfield, and even then, absolutely fantastic striker. He was almost like just reminded me of Alan Shearer, the Alan Shearer of the Irish League.
I know he had a brief stint across the water, but I feel like today, if you had a player of Glenn Ferguson's calibre playing, he would have been away. I just don't think he would have been about too long. I think people would have been watching him, and he'd have definitely been across the water. He's such a brilliant finisher, and how hard could he head at football?
Yeah. And he got a call up for Northern Ireland. It was quite late from memory. I think he was he 30 maybe or something? 30, early. Yeah.
So, to me, He's just a legend and a player that deserves it. There's been so many great goal scorers down through the years. I'll mention another one in a moment, I feel, when we move on to some of the other ones that are still to come up. But best goal scorer, if you're talking about just an eye for goal in a single season, Liam Boyce, that 12-13 season was just something else. But as I say, I've gone for longevity, and that's why Waterworth has just pipped Joe Gormley, because he's a few more goals than him as things stand.
Yeah, two very good goal scorers indeed. So next two then, best touch and your best goalkeeper.
Best touch actually wrecked me trying to think of this. And it's not because everybody has a heavy touch. I was just going, best touch, because I was debating this. I was actually talking to other people and they were going, Rory Hamill. And I was going, oh yeah, Rory Hamill. It's a great shout. Gary Hamilton, I always thought just had a brilliant way of controlling the football. But I've gone for Paul Heatley, because he just kind of floats about and very gracefully brings the ball down and glides past people. And I've seen him do it, since he was at Carrick Rangers, and you just thought, wow, who is this boy? And it was no surprise that he went on and became the star that he has become in the Irish League. And I hosted his testimonial dinner, and I, jokingly was saying he's really a Carrick hero and whatever. We've just let Crusaders have him. And Stephen Baxter said, well, how long have we had him? He's our hero. You've got him on your legends wall, but he's ours, really. So there's a bit of fun back and forth there. But I'm going to give it to Paul Heatley. He's one of my all-time favourite players to watch.
And your best goalkeeper?
And best goalkeeper.
Yeah.
It's probably a no-brainer because of the time period. Roy Carroll, when you have a goalkeeper that comes into the league that's played in the Premier League and played for his country, right away, I think the conversation closes quite simply. He was probably the driving force to that 16-17 title win for Linfield. There's been so many good goalkeepers throughout the league, but in terms of sheer ability, look at the level he reached. Brian Jensen then, comes in there as well, and Crusaders fans would be right to point to the impact that he had. But in a shootout between Brian Jensen and Roy Carroll, I would put Roy there. And I don't know whether that's just a wee bit of Northern Ireland bias in there as well, but I think Roy Carroll for me.
Yeah, I forgot about Brian Jensen coming over. He
what a keeper.
Yeah, he played in the Premiership, I think, for West Brom, didn't he? I think. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
So Brian, he had a great career, and then it was a bit random, really, wasn't it? You're kind of going, is that the same Brian Jensen? But yeah, he came over and did a great job with Crusaders, and their fans will tell you, how well thought of he was. So, only stands to reason that he deserves a mention there. But when you've got players that have played at the highest level, we've had some incredible servants in the Irish League, and you could run through clubs that have had, the likes of an Elliot Morris. I mean, Elliot is just an absolute legend, and there are very few people that could achieve what he has done for as long as he did, and continue to put in great performances through difficult times for his club and all the rest of it. I really, really, really rate and respect him, but I'm sure even he would admit, Roy Carroll's it's a different conversation.
Yeah, another one that came to mind, I remember, it was a real random signing as well, but again, he played a good few years in the Premier League. Kevin Pressman, I remember he came over to play for Portadown.
Yes. Good show.
A season or two, I remember that. Just remember him from back in the day for Sheffield Wednesday, when I was first starting to watch Liverpool. Crush my heart. The Roy Evans days. God, they were... Anyway, let's not talk about that. So next couple then, I want you to pick your best defender, best midfielder, and best striker.
So I guess it's probably not a surprise a lot of these players have played for Linfield just because of it's Linfield, and they're the team that hoovers up the best players, and that's why everybody that doesn't support Linfield hates them. Maybe among other reasons, and I'm not having to dig at you, Linfield, but I think it's fairly well documented. Best defender is Jimmy Gallagher, won Player of the Year a few years ago with the Football Writers, and it takes a lot for a defender to do that. When I think of the best defenders, I'm always sort of looking across the centre backs, and my time is just really after some of the last great defenders were kind of bowing out. So in case anybody's thinking of like a Colin Nixon, I was there the day he played his last league game for Glentoran, but I didn't see enough of him. I wasn't reporting on him at his best to include him in this conversation, but I mean, certainly deserves a mention, like Winky Murphy, who was finishing off his career with Glenavon, of course. And I actually was, at that point, I did a few Glenavon matches in a row, and he always seemed to get man of the match, and I wasn't sure whether it was because he was the best player on the pitch or whether there was another arrangement there, or it was like, and it's Winky Murphy, and you're like, was he playing this week? He's got it again. But, so many battle-hardened defenders and quality. Colin Nixon, just as a little aside, was the first player I saw get like a superstar treatment, I felt, in local terms, when he was coming off the pitch that day at the Oval and he'd scored in that game. There were kids everywhere surrounding him. Come and get your shirt, come and get your shorts. At the end of it, he was giving away shin pads and everything. He was down to his whiteys, and it was like, what's going on here, standing in his knickers at the football ground. But it was, something that you maybe see like a Cristiano Ronaldo or something, where they just mob around you and basically try and rip your clothes off just so they can have a memento. But yeah, Colin Nixon had certainly that star factor. But for me, in terms of over the last 10 years that I've been covering the league, Jimmy Gallagher has been imperious, and he's been a standout talent. Moving into the midfield, just quickly, Jamie Mulgrew, for all the reasons I said, he's the best captain. I think he's a stunning midfielder, and I personally have a bias for that type of midfielder. In case people are going, well, why don't you pick, maybe tricky wingers, or people that like to say like a left forward, right forward's really a winger and a midfielder or whatever. So I'm disqualifying all those just to kind of preface that. But when I think midfielders again, I think down through the middle, and I'll say Mulgrew. And then striker, I referenced them earlier as well, but Liam Boyce for that 2012-13 season, and then the season after it as well, but he was golden boot the first year there, before he got his move across the water. Just amazing, absolutely amazing. He's gone on to play for Northern Ireland a pile of times, and it speaks for itself. But the Boyce-Gormley partnership was phenomenal, and I just wish we got to see it in the league a few more years than we did, because it was like a cheat code to football.
Yeah, they were just majestic, weren't they? Absolutely majestic. Just complemented each other so well, and as you said, he's went on to have a brilliant career and a few more good years left in him, no doubt. So what about your best lefty and best righty in the Irish League?
So lefty, initially, first name that came into my head was David Cushley, because nobody hits a ball harder. But I stewed over it, and I've dropped him down. But it's for a very good player in Martin Donnelly. I think when you're thinking about left foot, you always want to think of somebody creative. I don't know why that is. Everything looks better with a left foot. And as a lefty myself, I wish that was said of me. But Martin Donnelly, for what he could do with the ball, the way he could just dance past players, the way he could deliver it, inch perfect. He was just so exciting to watch. And yeah, I don't know if it gets much better in the last 10 years than him. By the way, if you want to counterpoint any of these, I'm absolutely open to debate them, because I've scribbled these down, but if there's a glaring omission, tell me off.
No, there's nobody stood out yet. They've all been, have to say, very good shouts. Martin Donnelly, I can't really argue with that one.
So yeah, he's gone for my left foot, and then right foot was, because I was going like, what do I want to say here? In terms of how am I picking this? That was where I spent a lot of time. I was always the kid at school that took ages to start the essay and found it really easy to write it afterwards. But it was like, what am I trying to do here? I spent a lot of time pondering, and in the end, I've said Gavin White just because of the skill and the flair, and I wanted to find somewhere to mention him. He hasn't the most powerful shot, but he's right-footed and he's an incredible player. So that was the basis of that. Case closed, Your Honour. But yeah, Gavin White, some of the little tricks and flicks and the touches that he had and the pace and the close control. I've gone for Gavin White.
Yeah, you have to mention him somewhere, don't you? Again, another fantastic player.
Gavin White was the first player that allowed me to understand what levels looked like in terms of, okay, he's amazing in the Irish League, but he's not just an Irish League player. If that makes any sense, when you start to go, oh, he can do this at international level, oh, he can do this, at a higher standard in England. Because before then, I looked at players who were brilliant here and just thought they were brilliant here. And then that game I was talking about for Northern Ireland against Spain, you see players dazzle that night, and he was one of them, up against defenders from La Liga. And you're going, well, if this boy's been marking Messi a couple of weeks ago and now he's struggling against Gavin White probably, deserves that shot to be playing at a higher standard. So, yeah, Gavin for me was that player that allowed me to kind of understand, and Mark Sykes actually too, to be fair to him. You look at players like that up close and you know that they're talented, but seeing people like that allowed me to understand, okay, and this is how it'll translate. Because beforehand I just knew they were good in the local context, and I couldn't sort of picture how that would work its way across the water. But I certainly do now from seeing players of their calibre.
Yeah, and it's good to see them getting their opportunity and taking their opportunity, which is great, and a great reflection on the Irish League as well, but also more importantly the players themselves. So, what about the best manager?
Best manager, David Jeffrey. I think when you sit down and have the discussion, you go David Jeffrey, Roy Coyle. But again, for the time period, I got to see sort of his latter years at Linfield. I actually think, well, he's obviously had a very difficult season with Ballymena United. Has anyone been more unlucky in recent times in terms of cup finals than they have been? The final against Crusaders, where they're winning until stoppage time, concede an equaliser, and right before penalties concede another one. Going, winning in a cup final against Cliftonville and somehow conceding 2 goals in stoppage time and losing after extra time in a cup final against Glentoran. It's been pretty difficult for him, and I feel like the only thing he's missing is, a bit of silverware with the Sky Blues for people to sort of appreciate the job he's done there. But the Irish League's littered with good managers at the moment. Like Stephen Baxter is one of the all-time great Irish League managers. David Healy doesn't get the credit he deserves. I think he's a very, very, very good manager, and clubs should be looking at him. Oran Kearney deserves another chance across the water. And Tiernan Lynch, and people will maybe turn their nose up at that. There's a bit of a snobbery for some reason about Tiernan. People wanted Larne to sack him, thought Larne were underperforming, and look at them at the moment. Now, they might not win the league, but they believed in their manager. I'm not saying he's ready for that conversation yet of being one of the best. He can't be because he hasn't done it yet. But I'm just impressing upon the fact that the closeness of the title race and the interest that is in the Premiership at the moment is in no small part down to the calibre of top-level coaches we have in the country. So it's a very exciting time for that. But best manager, always pay my dues to David Jeffrey. From the minute I started doing this, you kind of just felt that he has that aura, that presence around him, and that hasn't gone away. So full respect to David Jeffrey.
Yeah, super manager, and he's great at modelling the ski outfits. Did you ever see that sort of video that was trending?
Yes. Class. He's brilliant fun. He's a great guy to work with on commentaries. He's so knowledgeable. He cares about his players. He does a lot of good stuff behind the scenes in football that people don't see. He's someone that I have been very fortunate to get to know better in recent years, and have only good things to say about him. So it's not a personal friendship pick by any means. It's just I just want to get across the fact that, sometimes on match days you see maybe a grumpy David Jeffrey or an angry David Jeffrey, and football will do that to us, but he's a great guy after all is said and done.
And then we'll rattle through the last couple then. Loves a hard challenge and your quickest player.
Right, loves a hard challenge, Ryan Catney. I don't know if I need to elaborate. I love Ryan. Loves it, Blood and Thunder. Him and Barry Johnston used to box the head off each other, and they were teammates. So that kind of tells you all you need to know. Just unleash those two, and you've got one hell of a midfield. But Cats, for me, gets the pick. When I think of a proper crunch and tackle, I know he's never going to shirk it. So, and I say that with full affection because I love those. So Ryan Catney, please and thank you. And quickest player, probably Paul Smith. Shane Lavery's very fast, but I think I would love someone to tell me which one's faster, because it's probably quite close. But Paul Smith, just lightning, isn't he?
Yeah, and Shane Lavery as well. He's pretty quick, Lurgan man as well. So he is.
I know. Who do you think's faster?
I'm probably going to have to side with Shane, to be honest with you. But
is it Shane? Yeah,
it's a tough one, isn't it?
Might be Shane.
And I think he's
the goal he scored against Carabag.
I was just going to mention that. Yeah, I've seen that actually recently, a couple of weeks ago. Fabulous finish, the composure on his left foot. But we turned of speed there for that goal.
Tell you what, in moments, if I could have moments back as well, that was a great moment to do. I did that for radio and near lost my voice trying to shout over the crowd. That was class. But just the pace on him was terrifying. I knew he could do it because I'd seen him quite a bit with the Northern Ireland under-21s, and had watched him quite a bit. And there was a bit of a Wayne Rooney a young Wayne Rooney about him in terms of his physique, and he's physical, but he's fast and he's aggressive. But Paul Smith or Shane Lavery, someone tell me which one's faster, but I feel like they're probably the two fastest.
And what about then best all-round player? It's always a tough one to answer. Richie said all these, so I'll blame him. But yeah, best all-round player.
So it depends what way, like if you're talking about versatility, or are you talking about just who is the most talented player when all is said and done?
I would say that's probably, best all-round player when it's all said and done.
So I'll go with Gavin White. I am just after like the Stuart Dallases and stuff like that. So Gavin White, international footballer, we saw what he could do in the league, exciting player. That's why I've picked him. Probably obvious answer really, but I love watching him play. And he was always exciting playing for Crusaders, and it was no surprise to us to see him, take that on to the next stages of his career, and hopefully he can find a bit of club form, whether that's at his current club or whether it means moving on, whatever. But he's a great player, and probably my pick for best all round.
Okay. And then we're down to the last two. The player that got better with age, and then the player who always gives 100%, which I kind of put down as more like your James Milner type player.
So better with age, I am going for, with the season that's in it, Philip Lowry. He's had his best goal scoring return of his entire career.
That's a good shout.
And he is just playing ridiculously well. We all know that he is a quality footballer, but should he be as good as he is at this stage? It's just amazing. Like, he is going to be at 33, he's 34 in the summer. He won't thank me for that, but he has to be one of the top players in terms of just how you're judging any player this season, but also when you're looking at who's going to win Player of the Year, he's going to be in that conversation. And, to be doing that now is full credit to him for how fit he keeps himself, how he applies himself. And there have been rumblings about, would he be moving on at one point from Crusaders? The last couple of transfer windows, there have been a couple of wee rumours about him. Look at what he's doing. So Philip Lowry is my pick there. And then player who gives you 100%. In terms of admiration, it's hard to admire many more than I admire Jim Irvin. Obviously, these days at Carrick Rangers, some of his close friends would probably say what is close to 100 now. Jim is in incredible shape. I wish at any point in my life I was as fit as Jim Irvin is now, and it's not even the fittest he's ever been in his life. He's just an absolute machine. Never stops. Just brilliant role model. What is he, 37, I think? And he's in great nick. He's a leader. He is a very valuable player as far as what Carrick Rangers are trying to do. And yeah, he gives me that kind of James Milner vibe, because you could deploy him at any stage for any occasion and he's not going to let you down. And whenever he decides to hang up the boots, he'll be able to look back on an amazing career. But imagine being in your late 30s and having as much energy as Jim. It's frightening, to be honest. I'd probably need to start asking him how he's doing it.
Yeah, maybe it's those Ryan Giggs yoga classes. Not what he used to do back in the day. The yoga classes.
It is. I like that. I don't know that I want to picture Jim doing those sort of stretches now. I'm not sure that he would pull off the lycra, but if he does, he can keep that to himself.
Well, some great shouts there, I have to say. I can't really argue with too many of them, but who knows? You might get a few people commenting on Twitter or elsewhere, disputing a couple of your shouts, but some great,
absolutely.
Great calls.
Well,
that's what it's all about.
Clarke Show, fire me an opinion and let me know. It's definitely worth a debate, and they're not. It's not like cases now closed on those by any means. They're just very difficult questions. And then I tried to think, well, these are probably the ones I'll lean towards. But, there's definitely a wee bit of personal bias in there, because when you talk about midfielders, I like centre midfielders, and I like players that get stuck in and are good on the ball, where somebody might like somebody a bit more pacey and someone that takes men on in a different type of way, running down the wing. But hey ho, whatever you think, let me know what you think. And I've been told I'm wrong plenty of times, so you won't be upsetting me.
Well, Michael, thanks a million for coming onto the podcast. I really appreciate it, because I know you're a busy man, and the last thing you want to be doing during your downtime is to be doing another podcast. But I appreciate your insight to everything from your playing career and commentating and everything else. I know you've dreams and aspirations to move on, and I've no doubt you'll certainly do that. And just remember, in a couple of years' time, you still want to kick ball, more than welcome to drive up the M1. Knockromer Park is the ground of Oxford Sunnyside if you want to play a few over 35s games. Left back, centre back, to be honest with you, we don't even care. You can play wherever you want to play, to be honest with you, the way we're playing at the minute. We just need a few tough defenders just to keep out the goals at the minute. So if a game on Sunday, fingers crossed, we can keep the score down. But sure, it's all a bit of crack. Well, that's what we keep telling ourselves. But it's not easy. Yes, well, if you can try and not concede 7 or 8 a game, that'll be your first little win. Anything after that's a bonus. Well, that's it. But again, thanks a million, and all the best with your podcast. And keep in touch. Well, yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. Really enjoyed chatting to you, and best of luck with everything you're doing on Keepie Uppies too. At some point, we're going to have to turn the tables on you and get you to answer all these difficult questions, because you're going to have a lovely list of all the answers that we've given over the various weeks and various guests. So it'd be interesting to know what the pair of you would be thinking, behind the scenes here when you're not plotting the big match in the over 35s, the real meat and bone stuff, the proper football, let alone the waffle I get up to. But look, great talking to you, Niall, and thanks for having me on. No worry. All the best, Michael. Good luck.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.